Hello to anyone who's joined us early. We've started the webinar, but we'll actually start a few minutes later to allow people who are logging on to get into the training. Thank you. Welcome to the Developing Communication Strategies webinar for faith-based and community networks and organizations. We're going to give folks another minute or two before we start. We have a lot of information packed into a short training. Thank you for joining us today and giving up your lunch hour to learn more about how to develop communication strategies for emergencies. Welcome again to everyone who's joining us for developing communication strategies for faith-based and community networks. We are going to get started. I want to introduce myself. I'm Jill Cornell. I'm a community engagement specialist in the community preparedness team. We do community engagement for the agency for New York City Emergency Management, and we're so glad to share with you some of the strategies we've learned over the years, a lot by observing what the work that you're doing in your communities. But we've put it all together in a slide deck, and we're very excited to show it to you. In addition to using what's worked for other networks throughout the city, where you're going to learn about official resources for emergency information. And we're going to help you kind of identify how your community receives information and what you might think about using to get emergency information out to them, and to just identify communication strategies, as well as how to reach people with disabilities or low vision or hearing disabilities, and those also with limited English proficiency. So the images on these slides, we've got a big blue circle that with the title of the webinar on the left, and on the right, there are some folks in blue shirts giving out food at a food pantry. So why do we develop communication strategies? We really want to plan in advance of an emergency or disaster, and that's how each network developing its own strategies can really optimize what they do for communications. And a question for you all to think about as we go through this training today is, if there was an emergency tomorrow, where would you go to receive emergency information? And it's really important to rely on official resources, because you're going to get the straight story from them. I know that there are some apps out there that let you know if things are happening near you, and sometimes they can also spread misinformation. Unconfirmed information gets passed on by word of mouth as well, social media. And when information is unclear, it's very easy for it to get miscommunicated. We've also experienced, some of us in, over the years, that the situation changes so quickly that information becomes outdated. Also, and sharing inaccurate information can have serious life-threatening consequences in an emergency situation. So we're always going to want you to share from official resources. In the circle on the right is a number of words, kind of a thought bubble: pandemic, COVID, people, lifetime, government, normal. Just an image to show what responding to emergencies looks like and how it really encompasses a lot of different kinds of aspects of our life. And right now, what will you do? So we're going to just kind of talk through a little bit of a scenario of what you might do. So this is really for you to think about any structures that you already have in place or strategies for communicating. And we're going to give you a little scenario to play it out. So if you have a piece of paper, you can start writing with it. And also, I just forgot to mention at the top, though, we have enabled closed captioning. So you can click, usually it's a tab at the bottom of your screen, if you'd like to have the captions presenting. So the scenario we're going to present today, or that I'm presenting, is about a fire in a two-story building. So there are three images on the slide. On the left, it looks to be a screenshot from a phone, and there's a fire in a two-story building, and you can see the flames coming out of the second story. In the middle slide, it's a screenshot of our Notify NYC app and a map showing Lower Manhattan and a little bit of Brooklyn. And on the right, the image is taken off of Twitter, it looks like, and about a fire in Williamsburg. And you can see the building that was affected, as well as the fire engine and a car in front of it, and the ladder still extended in front of the fire scene. So in our situation or scenario, a fire has broken out in an 8-story residential building within your community. It's rapidly spreading throughout the building. The scene is blocked off by emergency responders, and hundreds of people are believed to reside in the building. Residents are being evacuated, and it's clear that people will not be able to return to their homes in the evening. So our question for you all is, how will you communicate with your network if cell towers and internet are down? I'm going to repeat that. How will you communicate with your network if cell towers and the internet are down? So maybe just scribble a couple of little answers, using what strategies you use now to communicate. The second prompt for you is, how are you going to communicate with your community members? So the second prompt is, how are you communicating with your community members? What will you do as a network? And think about the 4 clues to how we respond. And the first clue is who. The second one is what. The third one is when. And the fourth one is where. So you can continue to write. I'm going to advance the slide. And on this slide, it's titled Reaching Your Network. And on the left side of the screen is some graphic images about different ways to communicate, with little squirrely lines indicating communication in between them. One is phone, another is cell phone, mail. Anybody actually give or send mail anymore? Raise your hand. Phone tree, using your phone address book. A megaphone, so people often go around their neighborhoods in the good old-fashioned using a megaphone. Certainly we've seen the NYPD do that in big disasters like Sandy, where they would tell people to evacuate using a megaphone. A radio, so either an amateur radio or an AM FM radio, battery powered. And there are also some signs for Twitters at the bottom of the page, there's some headphones and Wi-Fi signal, etc. And this is really what we'd like to hear back from you right now. So what do you use just as it stands right now? There's no such thing as a wrong answer. We want to know what kind of communication methods you use to reach your network. And we invite you to write it into the chat. I'm going to read the methods as you write into the chat. And then when I finish reading them, Sanasa is going to read what you've written in the chat. Email, first and foremost. Secondly, messenger apps. So that's like WhatsApp, WeChat. There's a lot Signal. There's lots of apps there to chat with folks. Phone trees, kind of an old school way, either with the cell phones or landlines. A lot of faith-based networks still use those and they work. Websites, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, community centers, bricks and mortar. Just actually some groups throughout the city actually have a bulletin board in front of their community center where important notices are posted. Posters, flyering, radios, and the flyering, I know that NYCHA uses flyering a lot when they have emergencies in their buildings. Radios, different kinds of radios, ham radios, amateur radio. We have a couple of networks, Harlem Emergency Network and the South Bronx Emergency Network, that have been using ham radios, and also the Zello app. Canvassing, just good old fashioned door-to-door canvassing. And we're about to get into pre-scripted messages. So we're going to just let that kind of percolate there. And Sanasa, do we have any comments in the chat about strategies networks use?
Yes, Jill. We have a lot of people saying email, tests, and we have one person that said landlines.
Oh, wow. Great. Yeah. And what's great is to have multiple ways to get the information out. So it's wonderful that people are using good old-fashioned landlines as well as text messaging and the different apps. That really is that you can't communicate too much when there's an emergency. And maybe somebody's computer's down, but their cell phone is working. Maybe their cell phone is not working, but their landline's working. So it's great to hear all the different ways that people are using their strategies to communicate. And we're going to take a deeper dive now into actually how you make a plan and what makes up a plan, because I know that's like the meat and why you're here. And our suggestion, strong suggestion to you, is to establish communication leads to keep the communication flowing. So this is really just a slide with the text that I'm about to read on it. The background is actually the front of our office building in sort of a grayscale. Secondly, plan multiple ways to give and receive information. So that's something you want to be thinking about now. If you rely, let's say you just rely on the messenger apps or you just rely on the phone trees, what might you add in as a secondary strategy to communicate with your network? What do most people use? Let's just start to think about that. And we're going to take a deep dive into thinking ahead and writing out messaging scripts. So if you think back a couple of slides to the fire situation, that would really, you'll see when we do the scripts, how valuable they are and how they can have some nuances in them to communicate the message you want to give to your community. The fourth consideration, we encourage you, underscore, underline. That's why the word document is written 3 times. Document, 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 which is to document your strategies. And the reason for this is multiple, right? First of all, it becomes a plan and it's written down. And if it's stored in the cloud, then people other than maybe the main communication lead, which you'll hear more about that in a minute, has access to it. So if for some reason she or they or he aren't there, you can have the secondary person step in and take over that role. And also, for me, writing things down just makes me calmer. If I know that this is the plan and I can go to the plan, and even though that there's a big emergency happening and maybe a lot of my neighbors are flooded, I can go and see what my next step is. That's going to keep me calm and help keep my community calm. And the fifth strategy is just some more best practices to remember while you're communicating in an emergency. I mentioned it on the previous slide about establishing a lead. And this slide is split into two. On the left, it looks like a little bit of a puzzle, but it's people as the puzzle people in blue with a grayscale background. And on the right are our suggestions for how you mark out the leads. So there's the primary point of communication, whomsoever that is, so that their name and contact information is there, including their cell phone, landline, and email address, right? And then there's a social media person, because that's all that person should do. And then there are a couple of backups, right? So we're always going to be stressing the backups. And that's something that we also do as emergency managers. We have backups in case someone can't do a task. And that each role, whether the lead or the social media point person, should have a checklist of tasks that need to be done. So we're going to just segue into roles and tasks. So we are on the same slide, but we've changed over to exactly breaking down the roles and tasks. The primary point of communications are the lead, successor 1 and 2, and everybody should be incorporated into the communication strategy. And I'm going to give you a little hint here for what you can do after you've actually established this plan or strategy, is then to just have a little exercise and practice it and see how it works. On this slide, again, it's mostly words on the with the background of our agency. You can't really see it in the back. And we're breaking down what everybody does. So the lead, which is the orange rectangle on the left, on the top, gathers information, organizes the meetings with the emergency communication team, which is everybody here, approves the messaging, and amplifies the messaging both internally and to the general public. Like a lot of you may use your Facebook page to do that, your Twitter, whoever's following you on Twitter, Instagram, on the other apps. The social media captain will write out the messaging and include the verified resources. And they'll also amplify the messaging on all your social media platforms using the network's accounts and not their personal account. That's important. And the successor 1 and 2 are, again, they're the backups, and they can also help amplify the messaging throughout their community in the way that you've established. And we take all this training and guidelines from our community emergency planning toolkit. You can find it online. And these are coming from pages 22 and 23. So we've split this slide into two pieces. On the left is some small graphic images, looks to be about 25 by my count, of, again, the various ways that you can communicate with people. And on the right is an outline of how to plan for multiple ways to give and receive information. We've touched on some of them. You all practice a lot of them: word of mouth, email, using the internet, newsletters, text messaging, using a telephone tree with a landline and not via the internet. Although if you have it and it works, you can use that too. Using your cell phones and some of the instant messaging to multiple recipients that you can use on your cell phone, low-cost two-way radios, and ham radios. So we've repeated this a couple of times because it's so critical, planning multiple ways to give and receive information. And when you create a communication strategy for emergencies, we again encourage you uh, to create the strategy and then chart out the outreach plan, how you're going to socialize and amplify your messaging with your partners, which is the members of your network, and what kind of communication you're going to use to describe it and who the primary points of contact are. Now we're going to get into the meat of writing out messaging for your scripts. This slide is split into two. On the left is some graphic illustrations of people's arms with different types of communication devices, and subject matter looks like it's about a COVID-19 because there's a lot of the virus images on the slide, and people are using computers and their cell phone and their tablets to get, and regular old phones, and maybe even an Apple Watch there to get the communication across. And one of the things the communication support team can do in the network is to write out messaging templates. So we're going to show you some examples on the next slide. So in case you're wondering what that looks like, because we do it here at Notify NYC, we have, it's all pre-scripted messaging, and then we can plunk in the important either borough specific or neighborhood specific or timeframes, but it all goes into pre-scripted messaging. So we love it so much, we thought you would too. You might have to create a new plan depending on emergencies that are happening, but we are going to go over some of the examples, and we have examples for you to use. So think about what your network needs, what your community needs, how you want to do it, and how you like best to communicate with your neighbors. And we encourage clear, concise information, nothing flowery, not too many big words. You want to be able to reach the widest amount of people possible with your message. And also, if you are doing translations into other languages, you want to use words that are, you know, the simpler words are much easier for translations. This slide has two scripts, two messages for different times for a particular emergency, and it's a pretty flexible message. You know, you could plunk in many different types of emergency situations into the slide. So I am going to read through them. Message one on the left has date and time at the top. This is an emergency notification from the Washington Community Network at approximately blank time. You're going to fill that in. A brief description of what happened. There's two lines there to indicate you filling in a brief description. And at this point, we do not know the number of persons ill, exposed, injured, dead, etc. We'll continue to gather information and release it to you as soon as possible. We ask for your patience as we respond to this emergency. So that is really like that first message out of the gate, saying, we know this is happening. We are gathering information from reliable resources, and we'll get back to you. So the second message is also has the date and time. This is an emergency notification from the Washington Community Network at approximately blank time with a brief description of what happened. At this point, we do not know the number of persons ill, persons exposed, injuries, dead, etc. This has a little bit more information in it. The situation is under or not yet under, you get to pick which one depending on your situation, control. And we're working with, and then in parens, city, state, or federal. So if it was a city, the city's the lead on the event, you'd put city. If it's a federal event, such like a federally declared disaster, you might put that in. Authorities to assess community needs or determine what resources are available. As soon as we have more confirmed information, it will be provided. We ask for your patience as we respond to this emergency. And that gives people a little bit more information. So you can see that you can begin to really detail the type of messaging and also give it your own flavor, depending on your community. This slide is also split into two with on the left, there are a circle of graphic representations of humans in different hues and colors around a round table, and they're seated in chairs. And each color has a piece of the puzzle that they're about to put in together into the puzzle to complete the puzzle. And this is our reminder again to document what you're doing, write it down, and share your strategy. So, once you get to the point where you're writing it down, you're naming your leads, who's doing social media, who the successors are. We want you to write it down, and then we want you to share it with your network. And store the plan and the resources in the cloud. And something for you all to think of, uh, you could write it in the chat. You could just write it down for yourself, is think about what languages you might need to provide the information in your community and which of your team members might be the ones to best help you with that. So that's a little bit of tidbit from uh, the work that we do in the Strengthening Communities program, where we encourage our networks to look within their own members to find resources for translating. And that's really, really helpful and will help you in the pinch too when there's an emergency. And also who's the one who stays in contact with everyone. Perhaps you have somebody in your group who's always checking in on other people or always checking in on other folks on the block. uh, Mariah and I did a presentation with LES Ready, one of our strengthening communities and all around great community organizations active in disaster, about for Women's History Month. And we came up with this example that actually was a live example of the folks who used to spend, maybe they're retired, they hang out and they're observing their block all day long. And the strength of that, of course, is that person knows all the kids' names. They know people who has which car. They know that the red Fiat belongs to this person and the blue BMW belongs to that person and the Chrysler belongs to this one. And they're able to help get word out in that old fashioned way, which is word of mouth. And just know that there are a lot of resources that you have that you may have not mapped out completely, but that you might have in your community, like your congregations, your houses of worship, daycare centers, tenant associations. These are rich, rich ways for you to get a lot of information out quickly, just by sending an email or making a phone call. And think also about which of your network members would have the skill and staff to be able to run a communications or information hub. So it may not be the chair people of your group, right? The chair people, they're coordinating everything. So maybe it's like a really discrete organization that's what they do, is that they're always communicating. So these are some things, considerations for you. So again, we have a split slide, and on the left there's the word crisis is across a long table, and there are individuals seated around the table in colorful outfits and sweaters with phones and notebooks and computers and tablets and all kinds of things in front of them. And we list on the right side of the slide the best practices to remember when you're communicating during an emergency, which is really respond quickly. And you don't have to have the answers. You don't have to know the extent of the damage or fire or whatever it is. You just need to communicate that you're looking into it. Stay honest with people. You don't have to fix the situation. You can just let them know that you're aware that it's happening and that you're getting information, and also looking at whatever resources may already exist in your network. We encourage you to correct misinformation as it comes in, but don't delete the comments because you can create a whole little social media firestorm by deleting comments. So just let them there, but just keep correcting the information if people continue to post false information. We encourage you to stay present, not to disappear on any platform, because if you're used to communicating, let's say a lot on Facebook, you want to just make sure you put a message out there that says, we'll be with you as soon as we gather some more information. That just lets people know that you're working on gathering the information. And number five, I think I don't really have to tell you this, but we encourage you to show compassion for your community members that are suffering through the loss right now. Really, that expression of compassion goes a long way to deepening the connection that you already have with the different organizations and houses of worship in your network. And finally, actually creating a community emergency communication plan. You've established your leads, you have your successor, you have your social media point person, you are writing it down, and remember that note to document, document, document. That is part of a plan. This is just a little recap. This slide is just a list of the 5 best practices we want to leave you with. So establish communication leads to keep the information flowing, plan multiple ways to give and receive information, think ahead and write out those scripts, document, document, document. And lastly, that slide 13, which was best practices to remember while communicating an emergency. These are the 5 steps that are the basis of a community emergency communication plan. And next to last, we're almost done. You're going to get back a lot of time. Is official sources of emergency information. We couldn't leave you without mentioning my do one thing today, if you're not already, which is to sign up for Notify NYC. It's our official source for information about all emergency events and important city services and resources. You can follow us on social media, NYC Emergency Management. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Nextdoor. In fact, when we send you the copy of the presentation, you'll see that it's going to be on YouTube. So we have a dedicated channel for our community preparedness presentations on YouTube. So you can go back and noodle around in there. You should definitely follow us on YouTube. And there's a wealth of different videos that you can use when you're presenting to your neighbors and organizations. Our website, we also have a Help Now NYC website, which gets stood up for large scale disasters or emergency events. Know Your Zone, that's active right now. We're right in the middle of coastal storm season. The Atlantic coastal storm season is underway and it goes through the end of November. So all of you should feel free to go in and look up your hurricane evacuation zone. Our newsletter, our community preparedness newsletter, is put out every week. Right now we're focused on National Preparedness Month. This week's issue is going to focus on resources on what to do after a flooding event. I don't know if any one of you got it, but I took on some water last night in my basement. So I am going to be looking at those notes very carefully. And lastly, we have an advance warning system, and that's for organizations that serve people with disabilities or others with access and functional needs. And it gives a very detailed emergency, what we issue on Notify, but in much more detail so that organizations could break out information and send it through the different chains, either in their organization, for their clients, for their staff, for their executive staff. So that's specifically for people with disabilities and others with access and functional needs. And lastly, we love checklists here, so we wanted to leave you with a checklist for your own network's emergency communication plan, which is that organization chart that we've mentioned a couple of times. You're going to write out the roles and responsibilities. think about the beginnings of your outreach strategy, put it in the plan, think ahead and writing out those messaging scripts. So you saw a couple of samples. You'll get this slide deck as a PDF and you can look it over. And we suggest that you write for these scenarios there on the the 5th bullet point: fire, how to collect donations, if there's an emergency community meeting, blackout, or extreme heat. We encourage you to add your own scenarios to write out messaging script fours. And lastly, how will you share your emergency communication plan with your network? That's a plan too. Just like, are you going to have a meeting? Are you going to piggyback on a back to school event? These are all great ways for you to begin to socialize your plan so that people will then know, oh, this emergency happened. I want to get information for my neighborhood in Far Rockaway. Where can I go? Oh yeah, I can go to the Far Rockaway network, right? So, and we did not get a chance to put in a thank you slide, but we thank you for attending. We are now going to answer any questions you might have. Sanasa will read them and she and I will go over them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill. This is not necessarily a question. So we had someone say, I look forward to receiving the slide of this presentation so that we can help them.
Well, we can't wait to give it to you. So
Yeah.
it's going to take us a little bit of time just to upload the video. We get it off from Zoom and then we'll upload it. And once we get the information together, we will send it out. And we will also, shameless pitch, put it in our community preparedness newsletter next week. So look for that, those of you who are getting the newsletter. And if you're not getting the newsletter, we encourage you to sign up for it. So you can do that on our website. And Sanasa is going to put into the chat our email address. And if she is able to get the link, the constant contact link for the sign up. Otherwise, you can email us at communityprep@oem.nyc.gov and we can send you the link to sign up for the newsletter. So our primary way of communicating regularly with our subscribers is via the newsletter. So we do encourage you to sign up for it, and we put it out regularly, rain or shine, emergency, non-emergency, every week. And we're always working on it. And if you're hosting an event for National Preparedness Month, let us know. We'd like to let your neighbors know about it to see if they can come. And again, our email address is communityprep@oem.nyc.gov. And Sanasa, did you get any other comments or questions?
As of now, no, we don't have any questions in the chat and nothing in the Q&A either.
Okay, well, we're going to give you back 20 minutes of your hour. Thank you very much. And we have more events coming. So please be sure to either check out our National Preparedness Month site on our website. And Sanasa, if you're able to put that in there, they can look for the events that are listed under NPM or National Preparedness Month to schedule the next one. And we hope to continue the conversation with you about preparing our communities using communication strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. And I am adding these links to the chat, so feel free to click on these links.
And we will add these links when we send out the recording and the PDF of the slides. So you'll have that all there. You don't have to go click on them now. If you want to click on them now, you're welcome to, but we'll be sure that it's in our follow-up email, as well as in the newsletter next week. Oops, Okay, thanks, everybody. We're going to sign off now.